Good morning, it's Thursday and I hope you are well, I hope you are cheerful and welcome as always for our thought for the day to Penn Vicarage this morning. I don't know what you have planned for today. For me, I'm working hard still on this plan to get our church open for public worship as soon as possible. My ambition is to get public worship open as much as we can on the first possible opportunities. Not this weekend, but next weekend I'll be in touch about that. But that's what I'm looking forward to planning today. Now, Christians have always enjoyed art, and over the years there's been some very, very famous examples of Christian art. And one of the most famous, if not possibly the most famous, certainly one of the most famous pictures and paintings of all time, is this one. I'm sure you've seen it before. It's Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. Now, you may or may not know there's been a huge amount of controversy about this and Leonardo in general in the last few years, thanks to a guy called Dan Brown. And the question is, was Leonardo putting lots of special codes in here? So, for example, is this person really a woman rather than a man? The raising of that finger there, the angle of the chairs and the tables, and so on. There's been a huge amount of controversy. Was Leonardo trying to tell us some subliminal codes or something? Now, personally, I have read the book, but I don't know, and I don't really care, to be honest. My issue with this painting is rather more simple. My issue with this painting is it's just plain wrong. And it's wrong to the extent that I think it's actually quite unhelpful. Because in those days, meals just weren't like that. Even if you take into account the fact that they obviously were sitting now one side of the table for the sake of the camera, if you know what I mean. They just didn't sit for meals in those days, and they certainly didn't sit at a table. So to think of meals like this is actually a bit misleading. What they did is put that down. What they actually did, they used to sit in a circle, they used to lie on the floor in a circle with their legs kind of slightly out. That's how they did it. So they ate as they lay on their side, and they ate, and as they lay down, that's how they ate. Now, Jesus spent quite a lot of time at meals, as you'll discover, a man after my own heart. And it would appear that this morning's reading is certainly about that. It would appear that there was a tradition in those days that on the Sabbath day, that the visiting speaker, whoever they were, would be invited back to the chief Pharisee's house afterwards for a meal. And you might get the impression that Jesus must have been the speaker that morning, and he gets invited to the house of the chief Pharisee. But you get the impression afterwards the chief Pharisee probably wished he hadn't. And you can imagine a conversation with him and his wife afterwards, who's saying, that didn't go very well, did it? And the chief Pharisee, they know there's going to be trouble as soon as he arrives, because it says they were watching, they invited him for this meal, but they were watching Jesus carefully. Meal starts, and Jesus heals somebody at the beginning of the meal. Let's not forget, he heals him on the Sabbath day in the Pharisee's house. You can imagine the kind of rumpus that would make, not watching my place. That's where you're going under my roof, and he does it anyway. So there's already things difficult. And you can imagine then the kind of embarrassed quietness and the people not knowing quite what to say to Jesus after that, not wanting to associate themselves too much with him or whatever it would be. So Jesus does what you might call a bit of people watching. So I'm picking the story up at Luke chapter 14, and I'm starting to read at verse 7. When Jesus noticed how the guests chose the places of honour, he told them a parable. When you're invited to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honour, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host, and the host may invite both of you and may come and say to you, give this person your place. Then in disgrace, you'd start to take the lowest place. But when you're invited, go and sit down at the lowest place. So when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you'll be honoured in the presence of those who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled. Those who humble themselves will be exalted. And he said also to the one who'd invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your neighbours or your rich neighbours or your relatives, in case they may invite you in return and you'd be repaid. When you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame and the blind, and you'll be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, as I said, Jesus does a bit of what you might call people watching, and he watches the people at this meal and how they all like to sit as close as they can to the main person, and they all jockey for position to try and sit next to the most influential people to push themselves forward. And Jesus advises them against it. And this can be taken really in two ways. You can take this as simple human advice, or that you can take it spiritual advice as well. Humanly speaking, the advice Jesus gives is just plain common sense. If you go to a formal meal of whatever it would be, name of the game, sit in the lowest place. Then someone may say, "Oh, come sit closer," and you'll look good, and you'll look, you feel cozy inside because you've been welcomed up. If, on the other hand, you go push yourself forward and sit on the top table you're not supposed to, then you may get told to sit. "Oh, who do you think you are?" And go and sit, and you're looking stupid in front of everybody. So on one level, the advice Jesus gives here at a meal is just simple, practical, straightforward, sensible advice. You know, take the humbler part, and you look good. Because if you take the over pushy part, you may end up looking stupid. As the books I read said the other day said this: humility and humiliation are not the same thing, but humility, a lack of humility, can lead to humiliation. Think that through carefully, it's quite clever. But there we go. So on one level, it's simple, straightforward advice. It's a bit of advice so you don't look stupid in front of everybody. The other advice, though, is it's actually quite spiritual. And the key, I think, is Jesus has been invited, like I said, to a meal on the Sabbath day. In the parable, though, he talks about it being a wedding banquet. Why a wedding? Why has he gone there so quickly? Well, I think that they have the meal in common. But I think the wedding here is code really for the kingdom of God, because the Bible is clear that one day there's going to be a wedding in heaven, and the wedding is between Christ and his church, and that's what the last day is going to be like. So that's what heaven's going to be like, a great big wedding party between Christ and his church, great big love feast for the wedding between Christ and his church. And that, I think, is the key, is that heaven is a bit like a banquet. And the thing we need to remember, folks, is that we are at God's heaven banquet, but we're there by invitation. We're not there because of anything good we've done. We are there because Jesus has achieved us from the cross, and because God has welcomed us into his banquet. We're there not by right, we're there by invitation, and we have no more right to be there than anybody else has. So let's come to God's feast. But let's remember that we're there by honour. We're there by invitation. We're not there by right. And that actually none of us has any more right to be there than anyone else as well. And let's remember also that God's welcome is for everybody. Not just the well-connected, the rich, the clever, the powerful, the famous, and the really intelligent. God's kingdom is there for everyone. And he gives a load of examples of people there as well. The poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Everyone is welcome to God's kingdom, and nobody has any more right to be there than anyone else. We've all been invited, and actually, to be in the end of the day, it doesn't matter what people think about us. The only person whose opinion is really important in the kingdom of heavens is God, and true humility and true greatness is also found not in what we gain for ourselves, but the way that God encourages us, the way God raises us up, the way God honours us. That's the honour that really counts. So Jesus' advice after his lovely bit of people watching is, the name of the game is, try and take the humble part and allow God to lift us up, and so we don't look silly in front of our friends. But also to remember that it's a massive honour to be at God's wedding party. We're invited for the wedding party of his son to his bride, the church. We're there by invitation. It's an honour to be there. So let's enjoy being at God's party. Let's enjoy the celebration. But let's let him lift us up rather than